How's it going? My name is Ethan Diamond. This is my IST256 final project presentation. And what I took a look at is basketball stats from the 2025-2026 NBA season and try to see which stats tell the true story of how good a player actually is. And how I did this was looking at advanced stats, all encompassing player metrics that truly tell you how good a player is, not just looking at points, assists, and rebounds at face value, and then seeing which stats, which of the basic stats correlate well with these advanced stats that truly tell you how good a player actually is. So first we start with this interact by looking at some advanced stats such as win shares, player efficiency rating, box plus minus, and VORP, and how good the top players actually are at them. So we're taking a look at the top 20 players by box plus minus. We see a lot of the common names out there, guys like Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Victor Wembanyama, Giannis Antetokounmpo, guys near the top that are really talented. But you also see guys that don't get a lot of love, guys like Paul Reed who don't play as much, and have low points. So you might not look at that and say, "Oh, this guy's really good." But he's providing a lot of value for his team in the minutes that he's playing. And this is what these advanced metrics are telling you. They're giving you intel into guys who are pretty underrated and don't normally get that shine because of their low point numbers. Moving on to looking at advanced metrics by position, you kind of float around and look at these different advanced metrics, and we can really just see that center is the most valuable position on the floor. All the other ones have negative box plus minus on average, but centers are typically the highest, and it shows for PER as well. And this is because centers provide a lot of defensive value to a team. Point guards and shooting guards are their scores, so they got a lot of love in the box score. But in terms of advanced metrics, which is taking a lot of defense into account, you really see those centers and guys who are making impact interiorly defensively really get that shine. Finally. Moving on to looking at teams, you can kind of sort by team and sort by different stats. So let's say we want to look at the Knicks by points per game. We can see that guys like Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby are probably those guys who are getting recognition on a national level because they're scoring a lot of points, which is rightful. But then you have guys like Mitchell Robinson, who you see here is ninth in points per game. However, if we sort by an advanced stat like box plus minus, in terms of box plus minus, he was actually the Knicks' most valuable player this season. And this is a stat that's taking both sides of the ball into account and is widely recognized as a very solid stat in terms of evaluating basketball players. So we can see the guys like Mitch and Karl Anthony Towns were very impactful, even if they weren't actually the leading scorers on the team. You can do this with different teams as well. Play around, find your favorite team. I'm a Knicks fan, but if we look at Milwaukee by points per game, you see Kevin Porter Jr. is second in box plus minus points per game. He's still up there in terms of second. And then you got like Ryan Rollins, Bobby Portis, all these guys. Someone like Miles Turner isn't scoring as much, but he has higher win shares. It's something we can take a look at here. He's fourth in terms of win shares, even though he's down in sixth in terms of points per game. So after the team look, what I really wanted to look at was how different stats are correlating with one another. So I started by looking at some basic stats like points and rebounds. There's somewhat of a correlation there. Points and minutes played has the strongest correlation with 0.87, which makes sense. Guys who are playing more are going to get those points, and they're going to rack up those points. A lot of these counting stats have strong correlations with minutes played. Field goal percentage and minutes played doesn't really have much of a correlation, which makes sense. That's more of a rate stat. They won't really correlate with minutes. And, it makes sense that the correlation here is still positive, but not super strong. You see a lot of efficient guys coming off the bench that maybe don't score as many points. Now moving on to basic stats versus advanced metrics. This is where we can really see what correlates strongly with some of these advanced stats. Points being a super strong driver of a lot of them. Minutes played, having a decent correlation. Stats like steals, not really having as much of a correlation with something like blocks, having a little bit more. So you can kind of see what stats are correlating with the advanced metrics and what's driving, what's driving what I like to call what makes a good basketball player. And finally, moving on to the final part, what stats are actually driving the advanced metric, was just a different way of visualizing what we saw earlier. You can look at all these stats and see what's actually driving them forwards. What's interesting to look at is true shooting percentage, because total rebounds being third, you'd think is something that doesn't really have a correlation with shooting percentage. Like, why would rebounds really correlate with that? However, something to take into account is that guys who are bigger and getting more rebounds are typically taking closer shots as well, which makes sense that it's then correlating. And as you can see, this is kind of backed by the fact that assist is super low. So because that's so low, that means that guys who are getting assists are taking low value shots, which means their shooting percentage is going to be lower. Obviously, field goal percentage, a big driver there, 95% correlation. We look at box plus minus, points, rebounds, minutes played being super high up, and the same for PER. So overall, you see that points, rebounds, field goal percentage, turnovers are super big drivers of the advanced stats, and they do tend to take a lot of defense into account, and they can tell a different story from just those box score metrics that the casual fan might be looking at.